Welcome, Synthesizer Sickos. I'm Vulture Culture, and tonight we're going to be answering the question, which is the better synthesizer for the money? The Oberheim Matrix 6 from 1985 or the Roland JX-8P from 1985? If you want a vintage analog synthesizer, in my opinion, these are the two best that you could get as far as money is concerned. Obviously, we all can't afford a Jupiter 8, so considering you're probably one of those people who can't, these, after years and years of doing shootouts on this channel between synthesizers, really feel like the best at their price point. So right now, the street price on a Roland JX-8P is about $800 with shipping, which is incredible. Essentially, really just one of the best value synthesizers if you want an all analog synth. And then the Matrix 6 represents what I consider to be the absolute best sounding DCO analog synth from the 80s. Now it's going to set you back closer to $1,800. And a lot of you might think, wait a second, that's not that. But actually the prices of these have gone up. So I've been saying for the past year, get them now while the prices are low. Guess what? Prices have gone back up. So another thing is, tonight's stream is going to be for the truly depraved among you. So if this is your first time here, please like and subscribe. But this might not be the live stream for you, because we are going to get so deep on the oscillators and filters and all the technical stuff. If you just want to hear the sounds of these synths, I've done videos covering the presets and sound design with both of these bad boys in the past. So maybe check out one of those first. Tonight's going to be a real deep dive into the fundamental ingredients that make these instruments have their beautiful sound. So if you're all set and buckled in, I'm very excited to have you guys here. Welcome, welcome. Let's go ahead and initialize these synths. I have a retroactive MPG-8 here, and this is as easy as just holding this down, first flash, and now it should have initialized this. And it did. Now, on the Matrix 6, we have an initialize feature. We go to Master, 51, and then go to the, I think it's value here. And is that it? Yep, ready, press yes, and it will initialize the patch. Now, you'll notice immediately it sounds quite different. There's two reasons for that. One is the Matrix 6 might be the first analog synthesizer that I'm aware of that can smoothly blend wave shapes between sawtooth and triangle wave. And right now, the default patch has it set with, and I need to go to patch edit. And now as I change things, we can see what we have. So DCO 1 is set to sawtooth, but DCO 2 was set to pulse, I believe. And then we just need to change the shape all the way over to triangle. So I have an Oberheim Matrix X6000 here, which is the best way to program one of these bad boys, or like a controller panel. Any sort of free way to do it works great, but it's nice to have the knobs. And you'll notice we're almost there. For some reason, the default patch also doesn't have the frequency all the way up. So now if I turn that on the filter, you can hear that we are all the way there. And if you hear any noise while you're listening to this live stream, what's happening is YouTube is compressing the audio, and there's nothing I can really do about that. Make sure you're watching in HD. That's the best case scenario. So anyways, let's go ahead and compare the sawtooth oscillators here. How's everybody doing tonight? By the way, let's get a quick scum cheers in. I appreciate all of you guys for being here and making Wednesday nights the place to be on YouTube. This channel has been amazing thanks to the community that supports it. So I want to just say a huge thank you. Cheers, guys. Let's get this party started. That is, of course, if I can remember how to drink. Okay, so let's begin with the lowest octave. So hopefully that gave you a rough idea. Now, again, we're just comparing the Sawtooth. There's going to be a lot because both of these synths have different things you can do with the oscillators. And I love that you're going hard on the gummy bears and chocolate 40 Thieves. Yes, and the Roland plugins do tend to hog up a lot of CPU cycles. So what did we hear? I'd love to know what you guys think between the sound of the two of them. I'll give you my thoughts now. I'll keep going back and forth, and I generally try to not speak when I'm going back and forth because our silly goldfish brains only have like a couple of seconds of memory. So if I speak in between the examples, you're just not, it's very hard to hold on to it. So that's one of those things when you're watching any synthesizer comparison, be aware that your brain is playing tricks on you essentially if you're not hearing sounds back to back. So let's go back down. Everybody prepare their subwoofers. On the lowest octave, what I'm hearing is the JX-8P seems to be pushing more of the sub frequencies. I'm listening through headphones, good headphones, but headphones nonetheless. So if I was listening with a subwoofer with my studio monitors, it might be a different result. At this octave, the Matrix 6 has this really present bite to the upper mid-range. There's just this fairy dust on the top frequencies. Hopefully it's not getting eaten up by YouTube compression because that's what YouTube compression likes to throw out is those upper frequencies when you're listening to just oscillators. But what I'm hearing is a very beautiful high end on the Matrix 6. And when I play the same note on the JX-8P, it just sounds dull. But also extremely thick. I don't know what are you guys hearing? At middle C here, the oscillators might as well be the same to my ears. Little differences, but nothing to write home about. I mean, both of these synths sound great too. Anything I say that might be a little like negative sounding, that's just trying to pick out little differences. That's what we're going to do tonight. It's a stream for little differences. And again, probably not truly lost like I am. Will you be all that interested in these differences? But they do matter. They do add up. Keith says, the OB has a different saw shape for sure. Slope is probably skewed a bit. Not a pure ramp. AP sounds like it has a smile EQ on it. Todd says, the second harmonic sounds more present on the OB than on the JX. The JX almost sounds like it emphasizes the fundamental slightly more, but the partial is just above that slightly less. Yeah, I agree. I think the fundamental comes through a little bit thicker on the JX. The Matrix is a more flat, musically, they're both great. Some people prefer like fatness, right? That's all they really care about. I too have a sickness for the thickness. But as far as that really beautiful, almost Moog-like, just balance, the Oberheim has it. Little machine noise up there. I don't think aliasing, just a little bit of leak. Sensonic asks, what's the chorusing? Is that unison, pulse width modulation, something else? And actually it is something else. So even though these synthesizers are digitally controlled analog oscillators, meaning that unlike some of the more shishi expensive analog synths, these synths have digital control over the tuning. They still do actually chorus, or they're not perfectly in tune. And as an interesting example of this, we can dig into this a bit more too in a second. But the Oberheim has the M6 and the M6R. There's two different rack mount versions of the M6, which is the M6R and the Matrix one. The M6R and the Matrix 6 have an analog high frequency oscillator that's then divided down, and it actually has three. So it has two that are split by DCO 2, I believe, and then another for DCO 1. And so what that does in theory is there could be additional chorusing because of that, because there's a little bit more analogness. That's the theory. Now, in principle, or in actuality, I'm skeptical. And actually checking these two synths out has made me think that, because as we listen to the chorusing, you can hear that this one's a little faster. There's a little bit more detune going on. Do you hear the whale, the dolphining? It's actually about the same here. As we go higher up, so there's a little bit more detune happening. But when we actually get into creating patches, we'll see how that goes. So yes, and you can do unison detune on this. I'm not so sure about the Matrix. So that's a very good point, Alan. Welcome to the stream. So overall, what are my impressions of the Sawtooth waves? We'll do one more pass and then I'll give it to you, but I want to hear what you guys think. A lot of brightness. Very good. Really no reason to buy one over the other if we were only comparing the Sawtooth waves. So let's go to DCO 1 wave now, and let's change that to a pulse wave. And I believe, and we'll do the same thing to DCO 2. We'll set it over to a square wave here, pulse wave. And I believe we will have to adjust the shape to put it to right about 31, I think, will give us a square wave. And let's see if that's the same over here. And then jumping over to the JX, we'll do the same thing. We'll just pick a square wave on both. And we will do the exact same exercise. So I'm going to shut the fuck up for a second and let you guys hear both synths. And this time we will start high and go low for no other reason than it's kind of fun. Hey, Gingy, how's it going? So what were we hearing, everybody? What do we prefer? I see a lot in the comments here. So let's see here. Definitely prefer the JX for square waves, Paul says. Alan says it's more pure on the JX. I agree. You hear a little bit more sawtoothy harmonics, so you can kind of hear the wave shape happen more on the Matrix 6, or maybe not quite as pure. Keith says, the Roland's so polite. Obi's, so yeah, did wave be close enough, man? My wife asked if there's a test of the emergency broadcast system going on. AK says, the Roland seems more squarey. Yeah. So you do get a little bit more of a pure square. Also, the slightly tighter tuning. So the JX-8P has a digital high-frequency oscillator, digital clock, and I believe it's only one divided down. It might be two. I'd love for someone to give me a confirmation of that. But to my ears, they both sound good. Again, really wouldn't buy one over the other, but the JX might have the advantage. Even the fact that the oscillators are tuned a little tighter, you get a little bit more of a present, dare I say, Roland, present, bright, in your face sort of sawtooth sound, especially on the lowest octave. You can really hear the subwoofer punishment, just fisting that subwoofer. It really falls apart in the lowest octave here. Jim rightly points out, you can hear the click of the amplifier opening and closing on both of these synthesizers, for better or worse. I kind of like that sound, nice analog click attack at the front. I think they both sound good. Comparing different octave ranges, starting at the top this time. More of fundamental, again, on the JX, slightly just more in your face. Oberheim maybe a little bit more balanced. At this octave, I definitely prefer the Matrix 6. You really hear the wilderness, the wildness, the way that the detune between the oscillators interacts is really beautiful here. So it's just more wild. Especially in the low end, the square wave on the Matrix 6, just not all the way there. Now, if we turn down DCO 2 here, and so we have just the one. So no detune now. Let me go look and see on the OB, where is it? DCO 2 level, I think it's here. So, oh, wait. That's the lever, not level. Let me see if I can find it there. One thing about this programmer versus this is it's not one knob per function. You have to go kind of find things. It can take a bit. DCO mix. There it is. So let's bring it all the way over to just one square wave. And when we're comparing this, I mean, they both sound very close. So let's go to the next option. We have a narrow pulse. Now on the JX-8P, I don't know, I will compare this with the JX-3P in an upcoming video, but I feel like the pulse is just really narrow. It is like really freaking narrow, and I wish it wasn't quite as narrow because you don't have any option for pulse width modulation, not really. Before anybody I know about the cross mod trick, but it doesn't sound exactly like real pulse width modulation. To me, that's very, very thin. Jumping over to the wave shape over here. I'm not hearing anything. And then the mix. That's because pulse width is a separate option. Okay, so let's jump over to, let's make sure sync is off, and then jump to DCO mix, and then over here, and then pulse width, there we go. And again, I was on the wrong one. Oh wow, this is interesting. And even with the DCO mix, all the way over, I'm getting some bleed. That might be a little bit of a thing. Let's see, is there any way to get rid of DCO 1? I don't think so. I think we're gonna just have to deal with that, but I'm not trying to add FM here. So with the pulse width as narrow as I can take it, you get way more sizzle. Not nearly as much sizzle, right? I know these sounds are kind of grating on the ear, but it's just worth checking out. But the more important thing is, of course, we have many more musically useful values here. So instead of just having one pulse wave, which is very narrow and doesn't have as much fizz, on the Matrix 6, you have variable control. And of course, that pulse width modulation can be controlled by oscillator. I think it's LFO2, if I'm correct. Yeah, so if I go to LFO2 PWM, let's see what happens. We're listening to one oscillator. One oscillator. So that's really what you're spending the extra $1,000 on a synthesizer, because the Matrix 8, we're just not going to get there. If I go back and bring in DCO 2, right? It actually does sound pretty good. So again, this is all just sort of to gently touch on some of the differences between the square waves and what you're getting on both synth. Now, when we get into detune, right, I think that's going to be kind of revealing too. And my opinion on the JX-8P is you don't really need pulse width modulation. Now, this is where it gets complicated, and it's going to get really interesting when we finally get the video up of the JX3P versus the 8P versus the 10. Because when you have a total of 4 oscillators per voice, right, when you're using a JX10 in dual mode, something like pulse width modulation just kind of goes out the window. Plus the analog chorus, it is so fucking thick. It is so ridiculous that adding pulse width modulation is just like overkill. On an 8P, a little bit cheaper by about $300 than the 10, you've only got the 2 DCOs with square waves. It's arguable how much PWM you need, but it could be needed for sure. What do you guys think? How important is PWM to you? Synths are both like cranking loud now. Let's go ahead and add some release. Beautiful. We're not detuning the oscillators at all yet, right? Let's go and turn down LFO pulse width amount. And same thing for pulse width 1. Let's just make sure that there's none. And then let's bring the DCO mix back to what is the max here? 63. So let's go 31. 31 or so. Very tight tuning. Let's just double check that the pulse width on both of these guys is all the way down. Add some release to envelope 2. Very similar amounts of release. I think both of these synthesizers have linear digital envelopes, so they're also very comparable in that sense. So let's check out detune. No detune, right? If I go to, what am I looking for here? Edit parameter. Now I can see what I'm doing with the detune. So let's add 5 cents of detune to the oscillators over here. And then on our good friend, we have detune as an option here. And let's add 5 cents of detune on the Matrix 6. And this should get interesting. So bring the volume down slightly. Let me just make sure. Let's take her further. Let's give her what? Let's go to 10, and we'll do the same thing over here. We'll make sure that we kind of match that by 10. And we go. You'll notice the detune on the JX-8P actually gets a little bit more out there. A little tighter tuning. For what the synth reports as 10 cents of detune. Now, as we heard with the synths, just kind of naturally, I think the Matrix 6 has a little more movement even when you have no detune, right? But as you start to add it, you'll notice something interesting. So I'm going to take this one up to 20 cents of detune, and we'll do the same with our friend the Matrix 6, and you'll start to hear what I'm talking about. So for me, 20 cents is about, on the JX-8P, that point where we're starting to get seasick. Good for trance music, but also a little bit much. Very, very lush, very, very usable. Back to the Matrix 6. So immediately I feel the thickness, the warmth, the low end of the JX-8P more, and it does sound more out of tune. So if I take the detune up to 25 of the Matrix 6, that seems to take us to the equal amount. So this is like a parameter scaling thing. 25 cents of detune on the Matrix 6 is about the same as 20 or so. I almost think you need to take it back to like maybe 18. And I don't know if it has anything to do with the 3 analog high frequency oscillators, but there is a way in which the detune on the Oberheim is a little more pleasant to the ear. I don't know what that is exactly. It just sort of is a thing, right? Let's go. The phase of those oscillators comes forward at the front. There's something there. Synthsonic is calling for a filter sweep. Yes, I want to finish on oscillators, and I won't even finish because there's sync and cross mod, bunch of stuff to talk about on both of these synths, but at least to sort of discuss detune and what you're going to get. And is there a difference between high frequency analog oscillators and digital clock high frequency oscillators? And, you know, for me, write in the chat, and especially someone like Dubstation Zero, I'd love to know your opinion, because comparing these two, I'm not really convinced there's any appreciable difference that I'm hearing. I'm not getting that much more out of the M6 from the JX-8P, but, you know, there is some difference. There's something in there. you guys think? JX-8P sounds so much richer and full, Jim says. Cathal Hex, welcome. Oberheim had a lot more modulation capabilities, right? Yes, so the Matrix 6 inherits a lot of the features from the Matrix 12. So just to cover some quick ones, we don't have any filter FM in the JX-8P. We don't have pulse width modulation. That's the big omission. We have a bunch of stuff. So we have 3 envelopes and 2 LFOs per voice, plus a global vibrato LFO. So essentially 3 envelopes and 3 LFOs. And then on this synth, we have 2 envelopes and 1 LFO. So right there's a lot. We also have a ramp generator, which can be used sort of as an additional simple envelope. So if you want to do things like pitch bends at the beginning of notes, a la the blip on the famous Oberheim brass sound, those types of things. And then, of course, frequency modulation of the filter from one of the oscillators, which we also don't have. So in terms of what they can do, the Matrix 6 is more flexible. I should say, too, both of these synthesizers have velocity and aftertouch, making them great controllers. I have to say the feel of both key beds is excellent. I love both of them. I don't think there's a one that I would say is better. Probably the Oberheim slightly. Slight edge to the Matrix 6, but nothing I would buy one over the other for sure. Lyle May's patch uses the ramp. Yeah, for sure. Syntonic says, I only say that because they're both so great. And they're so similar, so maybe the filter makes the difference. No, I agree. Monty, welcome. How's it going, my friend? Almost an hour and you haven't hit the tune button on the M6. Yeah, if it's good, it's good. Let's see. Daniel Perkins says, I believe the JX-8P you have is warmer sounding JX. The JX-8P that doesn't have the preset names on the numbers is apparently more clinical sounding. Yeah, so we'll get into that in the future video, but I've been deep diving with the help of some of the members of this channel. Shout outs to Jason and 2D Cat for helping me go through this. But I am not convinced that the op amps in the JX-8P in the different revisions make a whole lot of difference, if any appreciable difference. This is a JX-8P revision 1. If there's a coveted version, it would be this version. It does have the preset names. It was actually made in July of 1985, so I decoded the serial number. And so this is in the first batch of synths they made. And because of that, it uses the same op amp that was used in the Ibanez Tube Screamer. And I think for that reason, people think this synth might be the warmer version. Certainly Zach Marr from Alamo Sound Labs seems to think so. I think I'm saying his name and his channel correctly. I don't think so. And you can look up comparisons of all of the different, of that exactly. I think it's 4558 op amp chip, and there's a million different versions of it by different manufacturers, and comparing them, I just don't think there's a difference at all. I think if there are differences between the revisions of the JX-8P, it probably comes down to the way that the filter is tuned. One might be brighter or darker, and I think that's going to make a bigger difference, in my opinion, Daniel. Of course, I could be wrong, and we're going to do some science on it in the future. So, yeah. Where did you get the wood cheeks for your M6? Been looking for some for mine. When I bought this synth, it had it. The original owner bought it in the 80s, and he loved this synth. He took incredible care of it. He was a venomous snake milker. You're always going to meet weirdos and interesting people if you're buying vintage synths. He's down in Miami milking venomous snakes. Like when you walked into his place, I'm afraid of snakes, by the way, like terrified of snakes, even small snakes. And just there's like an anaconda skin wrapping the room and boxes and boxes like stacked up. Like the way that I have synthesizers, this motherfucker had snakes, and even reached in to the box of coral snakes and just grabbed one out like it was nothing. And he said, yeah, I'm so he takes so much anti-venom that basically he can't be killed by a snake. I was like, oh my God. Really fascinating guy, nicest guy ever, and he was kind enough to sell me this Matrix 6 with the Obi Magic X and all of that, and he just took incredible care of it. And this synth is in great condition too. Just had it checked out by Ramiro from Severed Machines down in Miami as well. So very awesome to have both of these synthesizers. I think we should talk about one more thing on this discussion of thickness, right? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to add some pulse width modification to both of the square wave oscillators. So that's not what I meant to do. I want to go to, here we go. So we've now added pulse width modulation to the M6. Obviously we can't do that here, so let's just check this out. So what are we hearing, guys? What are you hearing? I'm going to keep playing these chords. I did buy it from Florida Man. So Ed says the OB is way brighter. And so what's happening there is there's a little bit of science to that, which is most of you synthesizer sickers will know this, but sawtooth waves have both even and odd harmonics. So when you start with the fundamental and you double that, that's your first harmonic, second, third, fourth, fifth. And sawtooth waves have all of those harmonics and they lose volume as they go higher, right? Square waves have only the odd harmonics. So you don't have the first, the third, you have the second, the fourth, the sixth, the eighth. And that's what gives it that somewhat hollow sound that's more useful for fluty type stuff. Now, as you adjust the pulse width of a square wave, you reintroduce some of those even harmonics. And I don't know if pulse width modulation was invented to create the sound of two beating oscillators, but it's certainly very similar to the sound of, if you even have one oscillator with pulse width modulation, as you heard earlier, it kind of sounds like two detuned saws, right? And it's because you're getting these, it's replicating in a way the chorusing of the way that those even and odd harmonics are going to dance. And so it's not surprising to me that the Matrix 6 actually sounds a lot brighter now, because it does have that those extra harmonics coming in that we just can't get without using sawtooth waves on the JX-8P. So wish I could play notes. So we could then try to get some of those sounds back. Why don't we use a sawtooth wave on the JX-8P? Or let's start with a narrow pulse and see if that helps us. So no pulse width modulation, but now we're using a square and a pulse wave. It's not really fair, right? It's not even close. Let's use just two sawtooth waves and see what we get, as far as can we get some thickness now that we'll have those even harmonics back in. So to my ear, I'm hearing a closer match with using pulse width modulation on the Oberheim and then the sawtooth waves on the JX-8P. So I'm not surprised that a lot of the presets use the sawtooth waves. And now we have one trick, an elephant in the room I haven't mentioned yet, and that is, of course, we have that famous Roland chorus on the JX-8P that we don't have on the Oberheim. The Oberheim has no chorus whatsoever. And so what we're going to do is just kick that on. We actually have a couple of different settings for chorus. We'll try them out. I'll start with chorus 1. So now we're able to sort of get a similar sound. So I want to point out one thing about what you're hearing. The chorus on the JX-8P is stereo. I currently only have one. We're listening to this synth monoraily, so we're only hearing one cable or just one channel to keep it fair. But what I should say is that when you have the stereo chorus on the JX-8P, it sounds really great, super wide. In this case, everything we're listening to is mono. And it was for this very reason, to see if we can get the lushness of the Oberheim pulse width modulation with the JX-8P. And the way I'm doing that, yeah, it's actually pretty incredible, Vulture Mom, how close you can get them. So using sawtooth waves in a chorus sounds a hell of a lot like using pulse waves and pulse width modulation on the Matrix 6. So let's change it up now. Let's see, what's a chord progression? I think it's this one. Definitely getting the low end again through the synth, the jacks. So the chorus is losing some of the high end. And so really what I'm noticing is how much more the Matrix 6 is going to take us into the capacity to get brightness without even using something like Filter FM. It's just got that presence in the upper range, and the JX-8P just doesn't have it. Not as much, but that's not necessarily bad when you're buying a vintage synth, because a lot of times you want them to sound a little bit, warm, right? You want it to sound thick. I mean, what are we hearing here? For me, they're both great in different ways, but they're really starting to show kind of the difference of what's possible with both of them. But you couldn't say one is objectively better than the other. in terms of if you count the chorus as a way to get the thickness back into the sound, I do think the sawtooth waves with the chorus sound almost like the pulse width modulation on the M6, which is a really cool sort of, lesson to be learned, which is if you want a certain kind of sound, there might be multiple paths to get there. And that's just one of the beautiful things about analog synthesis, is that you're not confined to, there's only one way to get a brass sound or a string sound or something, in my opinion. Cheers, guys. Now, I think we have really beat to death the oscillators, and again, we haven't even gone into the sync, all sorts of stuff. I just want to dig in on this kind of interesting, deeper dive, not just between these two synths, but also talking about high-frequency oscillators and how that affects things. Now I think it's time for us to jump in to the wonderful world of filter sweeps. So I think I'm going to leave the oscillators up and turn the chorus off. Use about 15 on that. Now I'm going to go to pulse width modulation and bring it down on both of them. Make sure we're all the way off there. Go to DCO 1 wave. Set it to sawtooth. DCO 2 wave. You can also, by the way, on the Oberheim, we can have both sawtooth and square waves at the same time. So you can be doing pulse width modulation and have sawtooth waves. And similar to the oscillator on a Juno, when you turn on the sawtooth wave and the square wave at the same time on the M6, you don't get oscillator beating between those two oscillators, if that makes any sense, because they're being sourced from the same oscillator. Did I say that correctly? What it is DCO 1 can output both a sawtooth wave and a square wave at the same time, but they will be phase locked because they're coming from the same oscillator. It is the same oscillator, it's just how it's shaped. So again, we don't have triangle waves on the JX-8P, and we don't have the ability to have both a square and a sawtooth wave at the same time. So those are just more things, more options you have. And now let me just make sure that the wave shape is all the way over there, and wave shape. So there we go. Sorry, wrong way. And we will go turn envelope 2's release down, and we will bring the D. Where was that again? There it is. And let's just bring the detune to, let's try 10 versus 10. 10 versus 15. Now we need a little more. That's funny here. The detune's a little further. Oh yeah, that makes sense. So a detune of 15 is about a detune of 10 over here. I think this is a good place to start for filter sweeps. What do you guys think? Are you guys having a good time? Can I get another scum cheers in the chat? I know this is super nerdy. This is super deep. This is not the stream for a beginner, right? This is a stream for the truly depraved, and I see that we have a bunch of you here. So cheers to all of you awesome people for hanging out with me. This part of the stream is where the real magic happens. As we all know, the filter is what counts. So cheers, guys. Finding the path. All right. Let's bring the cutoff down. Resonance off. Now, I suppose we should do this with the envelopes because we're going to hear the stepping if I do it by hand. So, set it so we're just getting those low notes, and then we're going to increase the envelope amount. we're going to just add attack and decay. 50-50 real quick, just see what it sounds like. Oh, yeah, and I have to assign it, right? Let's slow it down. I'm going to set settings of 70 on the 8P. That seems about right. Jumping over to the Oberheim, same idea. Little of that action. And now E1 from the VCF all the way up. Now we're going to select E1 attack and decay and bring that to about, what is this? Not 50 because our maximum value, so just 50%-ish. Oh, and this is staying down. Just trying to get these filter sweeps to be pretty close. We're starting lower. We're starting lower on the JX-8P. Whereas the whoa, sorry, that was a little preview for what's going to come later. Let's try slightly tighter. Does that sound about right? Does it sound about right? Seems like the decay might take a little longer on the Matrix 6, a little bit more of an exponential sort of thing going on. So taking that into consideration, let's increase the resonance to about 25%, which out of 63 would be like 12, I'm hoping. So let's try that out and see. Something like that. Starting with the 8P. So what are we hearing, guys? So what I'm hearing is a little bit more interest coming from, I think, the envelopes of the Matrix 6. But with that being set aside, they both sound really good. The JX-8P seems to have a little bit more resonance happening, which is giving it that wonderful Roland voweliness, right? It just has that sound. It's so gorgeous. Let's see. Adapt says, I never would have thought I'd say this, but right now the Roland sounds better. Friends with Monster says, Obi for me all day. Synsonic says, Roland is rocking the low end, but the Obi will kill it on the resonance test. Both are 4 poles. All right, let's increase the resonance further. So we're going to increase this to, would that be about 33, 32, I think. We're going to increase the resonance on the synth to 50 out of, 100. Now it gets interesting. I'm going to shut up again. I'm going to start with the Oberheim this time for no other reason than it's good to kind of give our ears different starting points. What are we hearing, guys? AK says, now the Roland is getting tamed. Sean says the OB growls. Daniel says, I assumed the OB would be better, but goddamn, the Roland is kicking some serious ass. Friend says, M6 so beefy and juicy, I want a hamburger. Sonic says the OB resonance is amazing. Ambient Nod says, if you love the throat of the Matrix, use it. If you want more precise, go for the Roland. I agree with that. Bobby says, the OB sounds fatter. 40 Thieves says, oh, I like the way the OB is evolving upward in resonance. AK says the top end of the Roland envelope loses the thickness. Yeah, so I think it's hard to say. We'll hear it as we increase the resonance further, but I think the Roland is a little mogier in the way that it loses a little bit more low end than the Matrix 6. Although I think the Matrix loses some as well. Speaking subjectively about the sound, I think that the JX-8P has this just very precise, I'm going to echo what Jason was saying, where it's got this beautifully precise, very Japanese, very specific nature to it. The M6 is all over the place in terms of the way that that filter moves. And it is so much more pushed, so much more masculine. You get that wonderful, fluttery sort of Oberheim growl to it. And I don't know what they do that gives it that magic, but hot damn, is that an awesome sound. Is it Tom Sawyer? I don't know. I don't really think it's that either. I think it's somewhere else. So let's say, what is maybe 44 or so, and 75% of the way on the JX-8P. So tell me, guys, what you think. Thomas Otzig. I totally agree. Monty, welcome to the stream. Early in the stream, I gave my rationale for comparing these two synths. The short version is, as far as I'm concerned, at their price point, these are probably the two best analog polysynths someone could get today. If you wanted to buy just one vintage analog polysynth, I would recommend one of these two, JX-8P at about $800 and the Matrix 6 at about $1,800. They represent different points. How much do you want to spend? You know, if you want to spend less than $1,000, I think the Roland JX-8P is phenomenal and very fully featured, but it's missing some of the features from the M6. I think here we're less concerned about ramp generators that you can use in the Matrix 6 and more about, do you get a sonic difference as well? Is the Oberheim Matrix 6 sound $1,000 better? I think they're both sort of top of the line synthesizers for what they did at the time. Of course, they're not going to be Jupiter 8s, but this is a stream for people who can't afford Jupiter 8s. So that's the rationale, Monty. Let's take the resonance all the way on the JX-8P. So on the Matrix 6, we can go all the way into full self-oscillation. So let's be careful with our ears. So let's stop just shy of full oscillation, so 62, not 63 on this synth, and compare the two sounds. That is a very not useful resonance level. I just want to make sure I don't have any FM going on here. Let's turn that down. Oh, we did have some FM, so let's do this again, just make sure. That would explain that. So let's make sure we're doing this right. Let's dial the resonance back to about 75, and that was what, 44 I said over here. So let's just make sure we're being fair. That would explain the growling. Sounds good. And let's go, make sure, let's drop back to 50% because I want to make sure I give you guys a fair comparison, and that was not fair to use filter FM. Sorry about that. So what I'm hearing at 50% resonance is the same sort of thing, whereas the Matrix 6 has more growl, and you do get these separations in the actual peaks of the resonance are more divided up. You get a little bit more randomness there, which sounds beautiful. But it's not anywhere near as growly as when you crank filter FM, which I can do here to show. Which is an unfair, cool advantage that the synth has. Taking the resonance up to 75 and 44 respectively. So right around 75% to my ears, you're really hearing, I don't know if the Matrix 6 has linear envelopes or exponential. My ear's not tuned enough to be able to hear that. But to what I'm hearing, I feel a little bit more of that exponentialness, especially in the decay. Don't hear it as much in the attack, but in the decay, you feel the decay stick around longer instead of a more linear just slope, which I think leads to the impression that the JX-8P has a little bit more of a digital type sound, right? It's just very precise. I don't think it should be knocked for that. Roland just was like, we're going to make this synth do exactly what we tell it to. It's very well behaved, even though the resonance can get pretty extreme. If I'm being completely honest, though, I don't know that I think the resonance is quite as badass sounding at full volume here. So we need to dial the resonance back a little bit. Juno 6 says you could change the curves of the M6 envelopes. Can you now? Got the manual behind me. I should definitely read that. Let's see. Want me to play them at the same time? Sure. Why not? You can hear which one of the, it really kind of takes on a little of that Tom Sawyer Rush sort of a thing. Looking at the master edit, I don't see if I see an option for something like controlling the shapes of the envelopes, but it's something that definitely might be possible. The Matrix 6 is very deep. Yes, if you modulate envelope times with the same envelope. Oh, that's some like double modulation. Yeah, so you can get a different shape that way for sure. But for just the average, you know, turn it on, apply an envelope, and don't get too crazy. Don't get too crazy with it. I think they're both pretty close. Now, let's kind of go back, and I thought they sounded really good at around 75%, both of them. What did we say that was? It was about 44 over here. Now, let's add some attack and release to both of these. And we're going to add some attack and release. Just see. and make sure we have release on both of these. We're basically going to put these synths through the evolving pad test. Let's kick on the chorus for the 8P. Unfair advantage, right? So we could sort of see how that filter resonance interacts with the chorus. And again, if that changes anything. Going to the Matrix 6, what we're going to do is go to DCO wave 1 and change that to a pulse width, DCO wave 2. Change that to a pulse wave. Yep. And then we're going to go to PWM and or leave that down and instead go to the PWM down here. We're going to turn that up. Maybe not all the way, but pretty close to all the way. And dial that back a little bit. Definitely getting some distortion in there, right? Let's dial the VCA back, but turn the volume on the synth up. So you can hear, and this is something I've noticed on the JX-8P. I don't know so much on the JX-10, but you can really push this thing into some not so great sounding overdrive. I think for a bass line, it might sound badass, but for something like a delicate pad, evolving pad sound, see that distortion, maybe not so friendly. No, Monty and Adapt, you guys are right, but what's happening is actually clipping inside of the synthesizer. So this is that op amp everybody was talking about that's so good. It's clipping the shit out of this motherfucker. They put a goddamn Ibanez tube screamer in this bitch. Very beautiful sort of sound. Let's increase the PWM all the way. There we go. Oh yeah, that could be it too. So why don't I bring the, thank you, Sari. I'm going to bring the DCOs down and bring the output level up by a bit and see if that helps. No, that did help bring it forward though. mean, I think okay, so yeah, Damien, you're correct that this bad boy goes for about $1,800 right now. Street price of about $800 for the JX-8P, which is great. I mean, if you could get a synth that sounds this good for $800, less than $1,000. Of course, you'll probably want to get something like a retroactive MPG-8, but they're not that expensive. Even factoring that into the price, I think this is one of the absolute best ways you could spend your money on a vintage synth, period. Bang for your buck. It's hard to argue. Of course, the Alpha Juno 2 kind of sits in this similar price range, maybe even a little cheaper. Single oscillator though, right? You got an oscillator and a sub. It's good for certain types of sounds, especially if you love those Roland Juno type sounds. It can usually do those just as good as the earlier Junos, but it can also do some really crazy shit that sounds digital or, you know, because of the complex wave shapes or hoovery. So that's an option. But as far as, you know, when I buy a synth, I want 2 oscillators per voice. God damn it. You know, I want that lushness. I want to be able to create a re-space line, and I want to be able to create a lush pad. And that's not what you get with the Alpha Juno. With the Alpha Juno, you get this very precise, beautiful sound. Also great, but a very different type of sound. Very brassy sounding filter. It's the same IR3R05 filter chip in the JX-8P as the Alpha Juno 2. But what's interesting about that is you don't really, they really do sound different. Whereas in this one, I feel like it's kind of missing this mid-range bite that the Matrix 6 has. Alpha Juno has it in spades. So it's interesting the way that different filters can sound. I am going to compare the Alpha Juno's oscillators, at least the square wave and the sawtooth wave, not all of the oscillators, of course, to the JX series and the filter, just to see if there's some differences there as well. Now, let's kind of go check out baseline territory. So what are we going to do as far as that's concerned? With modulation off on the JX-8, on the JX-8, on the Matrix 6. And I'm going to do sort of a similar thing. I'm just going to go to sawtooth waves on... I'm going to go square wave, oscillator 1, sawtooth, oscillator 2, and I'm going to turn the chorus off. I'm going to turn the release down and the attack down and see what we have here. We're going to turn the resonance down and the decay. Nice, snappy. Really great. We're going to bring the sawtooth up an octave from 16 feet to 8 feet. We're basically going to do the same thing over here. So we need to adjust some attack decay times. Gotta kill that resonance. Okay, so that's in the neighborhood. Really nice and snappy on the JX-8P. Kind of missing that a little bit on the Matrix 6. Okay, and what we need to do is adjust the waves back to sawtooth waves. And then we need to adjust the tune of oscillator 2. So let's see. To 24. Oh, no, just to 12 will be fine. Yeah, just 12 is good. Need to bring the cutoff up. I just want to make sure. Pretty similar. Adding a little resonance in now. What is the notes? Let's kill the resonance again here. And same thing here, just to, keep it kind of interesting. A little quieter here. It's interesting. I'm not getting quite as much high end, right? I kind of don't get the same. Lot of top end on the Matrix 6 here. They both sound really good. What do you guys hear? What do you think you would prefer for a bass line? They're very close, but they do have a different sort of, a different sort of vibe, don't they? They both sound good. Let's see what we have to see. What do we have here? Lots of how does it feel in the chat. M6 for the bass. Yeah, I don't know. They both sound good to me in different ways. I think that the JX-8P actually sounds closer to the original Moog analog synth that they used for that bass line. Blue Monday. New Order playing Blue Monday. I think that it sounds a little closer, and I like the precision of the envelopes a little bit more on the JX-8P. On the M6, a little bit more of both high and low end, so more scooped. little bit more mid-rangey, low, mid, warm type of a sound from the 8P, which is good. I mean, they're very similar. Obviously, not the most complicated sound. As we add some resonance, let's bring it up to, what is that, 25 and then 12, right? That's about what we want to go for here. Let's try it again. And just, I want to know what you guys think. Immediately, I hear less bass coming out of the 8P. Let's increase the resonance a little bit more on the M6. It's a little fairer. Let's go ahead and bring just slightly down, right? Bring the envelope amount down to see if we get it a little darker. Very interesting. Let's, for the sake of the experience, let's crank the resonance up to 50 on both. Just to give us that sound. I think we have to crank the resonance up to almost 75% to match 50% on the Matrix 6. So, what do we think there? Kame, welcome. How's it going? Reduce the cutoff on the JX. Yeah. It's hard to say. Yeah, they're very similar. Yeah. So let's see what everybody says. Keith is like, is this Serum 2? Jack sounds a tad weaker. Jim says, Pliskin prefers the M6. Sounds close. Jack's filter opens more or longer VCF envelope amount. Yeah. Synsonic says, wow, I'm totally the opposite. Roland has more below 50 hertz. Nice sub bass. Yeah, it's definitely there. Jim says the M6 hits harder. Let's see here. VCF envelope decay. I'm late for class. Welcome. How's it going, Skavenom? Roland sounds like a skating rink. The OB sounds like an actual record in this instance. 32 voice chorus from DP4 can make it more fatter. Yes, I guess it could on anything. Love the synth final countdown. Yes, that is a thing you can do with this. They both sound pretty good for this type of a thing, I would say. Both very good overall sounds. And hard to necessarily pick one, but I do think if I had to, honestly think the JX-8P sounds really good. And it sounds like the Moog Source. But it's just got a lot of fatness on the 8P. Differences in the way the key track works as well. So like one thing is this is as low as the cutoff goes on the M6. That's it. Like I can't take it lower. Not that I'm aware of, unless I can invert an envelope or something like that. Probably can. But that's pretty crazy, right? That like you're always going to let that through. Whereas we could totally cut out we can put the cutoff below the fundamental on this keyboard. So in that sense, I generally favor synthesizers that have more flexibility with VCF range going down. I like it when I can set the cutoff below the fundamental of a note. Conversely, on a synthesizer, like comparing the sequential Prophet 600 right over here versus the M6, that's another stream we've done, comparing two very similar synthesizers, one with VCOs, one with DCOs, but similar price range. In that case, I thought that the Prophet 600's ability for the filter to open up so wide, it becomes so bright that it starts to sound not so great. Sounds kind of thin, kind of brittle, kind of harsh. Whereas the Matrix 6 just sounds so fat the way they tuned it. So in that sense, I think the top end of the Matrix 6 is perfect. But I do wish it could dig a little bit deeper. It could go a little bit lower. And there are all of these things here that maybe I'm missing. Maybe there's a way to lower that or, double modulate it negatively or something like that. But I do think, let's see. George Ray asks, apology, are you using a Gleegly mod in M6? No, this is a Tontec modified M6. To my ears, it's probably the way to go. But it doesn't make anywhere near as much of a difference as the Gleegly mod does on the Prophet 600. Prophet 600 shipped broken. Like, it shipped fucked up. And with the Matrix 6, it's more about MIDI and getting all the messages to run smoothly and stuff, but the Matrix 6 shipped sounding very good. That would be my difference between the two of them. So yeah. I'm catching up with the chat here. Adapt says, it would be hard to pick. Both sound awesome, just different, but I'm being biased as an M6 owner. The envelope amounts. Yeah, no. I mean, I've got, let's see if I can do that. So dropped my phone aggressively. Let's adjust the envelope amount. See, with the sustain all the way down, adjusting the envelope amount doesn't do anything, sadly. I'm looking where my phone was, but it's not there anymore because I dropped it. All right, let's finish this off tonight. I'm going to just put a poll in the chat, which I thought I could do from my phone. Whoa. Let me see here. Can I do that? Looks like I have to do it from the computer. So why don't we take this opportunity to move our way back over to the computer. And I want to ask you guys, is the Matrix 6 worth $1,000 more than not? Let's go ahead and bring this up here. All right, so we have some music going on. And I want to ask you guys, starting a poll, Is the Matrix 6 worth $1,000 more than the JX-8P? I just want to know what you guys have to say. There's no right or wrong answer. And maybe we'll ask just overall which of the two you would prefer. Let's start off with the question, though, is it worth $1,000 more? And that'll be an interesting one to hear. By the way, guys, I just want to say thank you for getting through what might have been to some people an overly technical, overly nerdy stream. Because I always say, I was asked by Ian Dixon on his podcast, what are my favorite streams to do? And for me, it's actually the Versus streams, because they help me the most understand the difference. Because my theory is, or my claim would be, my hypothesis is that when you listen to a synth demo, it's almost fucking useless, because any synthesizer on its own is probably going to sound good nowadays. That's just the nature of synths, right? They tend to sound good on their own, especially when you drown them with chorus and reverb and delays. Basically, any modern synth and vintage synth is going to sound great if you just play it by itself, whatever. When you play two synths next to each other, that's when you start to really get a sense of, oh, I like the way this one filter sounds better than the other. And when you have a synthesizer that has incredible oscillators and an incredible filter, wonderful sounding envelopes, all of that sort of thing, those differences stack up to make an instrument that's more inspiring, in my opinion, than another one. And even if you pick two synths that don't necessarily have that much in common, I think it's valuable. Because when you hear a filter sweep on its own, it's like, that filter sounds great. But when you hear it versus another synth, that context, and I think that that's what the Versus streams do best, is they add context to what we're hearing when we're talking about oscillators and filters and all of that stuff. It gives your ear the opportunity to acquire a sommelier level of being able to talk about these components and what they actually do and how they actually sound, as opposed to, just hearing it on its own. Fucking DX27 sounds great. No, 65% of people said no, it's not worth it. And I think that's about right. I think the JX-8P sounds really incredible. Using sawtooth waves in the chorus sounded goddamn close to using pulse waves and pulse width modulation on the M6. And I think if there is an area where the M6 started to shine a little bit for me, it was in the filter. Just, I love that Oberheim growly type thing. I don't think it could get all the way to like OBX or even TO5 levels of Oberheim filter growl. But let's do another poll. I'm just curious. If you could only have one, would it be the JX-8P or the Matrix 6? Let's put that poll in the chat. Let's see what you guys say about that. Which is interesting, because I do believe there's something in spending the right amount of money. So I'm all about value on this channel. I'm all about talking about synths. Now contextualizing synths in terms of bang for your buck. How much money do you have to spend for that vintage analog magic? And in this case, I think the JX-8P is kind of at that point where I can full-throated say, yeah, this is a full-featured synth, all analog, at a really wonderful price. And then I would skip right the fuck past the Sequential Prophet 600 and go to the Matrix 6 if you want to spend a little bit more money to buy a little more fairy dust, right? The Matrix 6 really does sound beautiful. It's one of the most beautiful sounding synthesizers, in my opinion, even though it has DCOs. And it's just such an incredible thing. So in my opinion, that's why I picked these two synths. But I think there's some examples, like with the bass, I kind of thought the JX-8P could do that a little bit better. The lowest end of the M6, actually a little bit better for pads because it's not as present, but it did sound really good. It could do bass well. It's very, very balanced. It's just, and when I say balanced, I don't mean vanilla. So my accusation against a lot of modern synthesizers would be that a lot of modern synths are tuned so flat, they're tuned so predictable, they're tuned so with a lack of mojo, a lack of cojones to give you the flavor, so that they, the M6 maybe can't do everything, but what it does incredibly. Modern synths, some of them sound great, don't get me wrong, but they're a little bit more vanilla, and I like the quirky texture, the characterful nature you get from a vintage synth. And for the money, I think it's often better for a producer to get something like a Matrix 6 than a modern synthesizer. What do you guys think is the best comparison synth, modern synth, to the Matrix 6? The poll is closed. 70% of you would prefer the Matrix 6. I love that 30% of people, if they could have one or the other, is like, I like the JX-8P. I agree. I don't think you're missing out on all that much with the JX-8P. And if you only had one vintage analog synth, JX-8P, probably my recommendation. As someone said earlier, I can't remember this, Keith, or if it was Billy, the DW8000 knockout awesome synthesizer as well, can usually get for a little cheaper than a JX-8P, really phenomenal sounding hybrid synth. But I know there's some people out there watching this channel who are not vintage synth snobs like we are. Can I get some scum snobs in the chat? They're modern producers who don't own any vintage synths, but they've got that serial killer itch. They're like, oh, I feel like I need one vintage synth. The JX-8P to me might be the perfect synth because it's going to give you that vintage flavor that I don't think modern synths have fully captured at an $800 price point. Let me put it that way. With velocity and aftertouch, MIDI in and out and through, you can use a free programmer on your computer, desktop, Mac, whatever. With that being said, like, it's a perfectly good master controller. You can use it to control everything. Whereas, JX-3P, love it. IR3109 filter from the Jupiter 8, no velocity and aftertouch. MIDI implementation's a problem. You can't program it as, using something like a controller panel, a free programmer. It just doesn't work without modifying it. Thank you for the scum snobs. Friends says, can't go with res all the way open on the Matrix. Yeah, unless you're going for that fully self-oscillating filter thing, like if you want to do Iceland sorts of like noise, play the filter type patches, or organ sounds, Jim's thinking about the Matrix brew. So yeah, what do you think? What would it be? Probably the TO5, right? So how do I ask this question? TO5, Matrix 6, very similar price point. TO5's got all the knobs and effects. Matrix 6 has maybe some vintage magic. Does the Matrix 6 have some vintage magic that the TO5 is missing? Interesting question to ask. Yeah, Adapt Manipulate says TO5. Euro DJ asks, what filter is better, the Matrix or the Juno 106? I have not directly compared the two, but considering the Juno 106 is going to have a similar filter to the JX-3P, but be able to go fully self-oscillating, probably going to like the Matrix 6 filter overall to my taste. But if I've learned anything about comparing synths, implementation is huge. So the way that those oscillators are fed in and bias, whatever the fuck that is, certain things like that really do change the flavor and feel of a filter. The JX-8P in this shootout, to me, did suffer a little bit in the upper mid-range, wasn't quite as present, which probably makes it great for pads, right? But for I like a little bit of an aggressive. I mean, I am such a fucking hypocrite in a way on this channel because it depends. Certain delicate feminine filters like the DW8000 has this more delicate SSM type thing, like the Poly 6, where as you crank the resonance, it just sings. It doesn't break up. I like that sound sometimes. And then sometimes I want that nasty filter growl you get from something like a Matrix 6 or an Ensoniq SQ80 that's going to have more aggression. On my comparison of the DW8000 to SQ80, I think many people, Dubstation being one of them, were like, how are you saying that the SQ80's filter doesn't sound as good? And really, that was probably the best example out of any comparison we've done here on apples to oranges in terms of both filters sound incredible. That day, I said I kind of preferred the DW8000's filter, but to be honest, like looking back on it now, I think it's just, what do you want for a given sound? Do you want that really compressed, resonance compensated, dirty, Oberheim growly type thing that you get from the SQ80? Or do you want that beautiful, sing-songing, delicate, feminine, clean thing you get from the Poly 6 of the DW8000, you know? So with the Juno 106, probably going to be a little bit more in that sharp, clinical, in-your-face, precise Roland sound. It'd be curious to see. Be very curious to see. Let's see what everybody says. Adapt says, hard to replicate those decaying vintage circuits. ATB used the Matrix a lot, the 1000. I've not shot out a Matrix 6 versus a Matrix 1000 and just done like an A to B with them, but I'm skeptical that the difference in the high frequency oscillators is something to lose sleep over. I think the Matrix 1000's probably good to go. We'll see if I ever get the opportunity to do comparison. It would be a lot of fun. Let's see here. AK says, thanks, I ordered the serial MIDI mod for the JX-3P for real-time CC control. That's a smart thing. Keith says, I'm going to say it's the oscillators, oddly. There was some definite funk in the Matrix 6. Yeah, they do drift, for sure. There's life in there, and depending on where you're in the octave range, you get sort of different flavors of detune. Honestly, the Matrix 6 sounds very close to the Prophet 600 in terms of oscillator detune. In the comparison there, so that's VCO versus DCO, people did say the Prophet 600 had a little bit more life in the detune. For me, it was really close to call. They had a different flavor of detune, but they both sounded great. And I do think there's a lot of life in the M6. I would be curious to see if that life gets diminished a little in the Matrix 1000, but I'm skeptical. AK says the modern Matrix 6 for me is the OB6. I went with TO5 just because it was cheaper. I guess the OB6 is in the neighborhood of probably, I'm guessing they go for about 2,200 now, maybe more. Does anybody know? Jim loves an aggressive sound. Sari says the SQ80 and the M6 both use Curtis Electro Music filters. That's correct. Friends with Monsters says TO6 gives me gas. 84% of you, which I am shocked by, although this channel probably over-indexes in vintage snobs like myself. But 84% of you said there's some magic in the M6 that's missing from the TO5. Very interesting. Because, in my opinion, I think the TO5 sounds fucking awesome. I don't know. I could be wrong. I haven't done a shootout between the two, but for me, the TO5 sounds great. Should we do one? Oh, OB6 for 1,500 U's. That's amazing. I mean, it's kind of worth it just for the knobs, even if there was a little vintage. Let's go with OB6 versus Matrix 6. Let's just go real quick. We won't make this one as long. I'm just curious, just for the sake of thoroughness. OB6 versus Matrix 6. Do you think there's a little more magic in? I guess really the question is, in this way, what we're controlling for is there more magic in the OB6 than the TO5? I wouldn't have guessed there would be, but maybe you guys are more informed on that. I know a lot of you guys have sequential take 5s, TO5s, Oberheim OB6s, and I'd be curious to know, does the OB6 favor more, is more favorable to the M6 maybe? Todd Phipps pointed out the Cheetah MS6, which was very similar to the Matrix 1000. That's correct. Could be a sleeper. I don't know. The only reason I haven't had one is I think they go for about the same price as the M6 or the Matrix 1000, and so probably just go for that. But just because the Matrix 1000 has 1,000 fucking presets in it, so that makes it very useful in a certain kind of way. And there were some really great presets that existed. So Adapt says the TO5 is wicked. Can't wait to get mine. DeCarmick says, if you could get either, would it be the TO5 or OBX8 to add to a montage M6? DeCarmick, I don't know that I can answer that question because I haven't had direct experience with either. And that's going to be up to you and what you would say. What I could defer to is my friend Devin from miles away. He, I believe, sold his TO5 but kept the OBX8 because he said it was the best sounding synth. He did a comparison video. That's probably what you should check out. TO5 versus OB6 versus OBX8. And it's not perfect because he doesn't go through all the filter modes on the OBX8. So you can, deal with that. But he does go through it. The advantage of TO5 and OB6 is it has a morphing filter, right? So it can smoothly morph between low pass, notch, high pass, or low pass, band pass, and high pass. You can't do that on OBX8, which was really weird that they left that feature off, but I guess it was just, they were going more for vintage authenticity, right? And so with that in mind, he would say, I think, that the OBX8's the best sounding filter in his studio. So there would be that. But for the money, TO5 sounds great. Hard to say there. Keith says the multi-poly smokes it all. I'm going to be challenging my friend Ian Dixon to see if he can recreate some monopoly sounds with multi-poly. I want to put it to the test and see if he can make a multi-poly sound as good as a monopoly. I'm skeptical, but we shall see. Not to say that the multi-poly doesn't sound amazing, but I just don't know if it's going to completely give you all of the vintage magic. But if anybody could do it, it would be Korg, with a digital synth anyways. Friends says Profits are more of a keeper than the OB6. Adapt says, I don't know why, but the OB6 always sounded really sterile to me. Keeping the Prophet 12, of course. Yeah, talk about an awesome synth. The Prophet 12, Dave Smith's favorite instrument. Jim asked to do a stream dedicated to monosynths. We should do that. Maybe I'll do a monosynth shootout. I think I've done versus streams of most of my monosynths. It would be fun to do 4 or 5 way. I don't know how many do I have. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4-way shootout with them. That would be kind of fun just for one stream. Yeah. So 60% would go with the, let's see here. 60% OB6 over the Matrix. So this is interesting. The Matrix 6, 84% of you said there's some magic missing from the TO5, whereas 60% of you said they'd rather have an OB6 over the Matrix 6. So it sounds like, if I'm decoding that correctly, that the OB6 has a little bit more magic in it. Maybe not vintage magic, though. That's not what I asked. So I might be triangulating this wrong. But it sounds like the OB6 is more of a keeper synth for a lot of the people in the chat, which I can see. It even just, I hate to say it, just even the extra voice, if they sounded identical, is a big deal. 5 is tough. 4 octave keyboard sucks. Mark Anderson says, let's see. OB6 firmware update, yeah, makes a big difference with the vintage mode for sure. Friends with Monster says, Prophet 12 is hard to get that true Oberheim sound. That's interesting. I really hope I get a Prophet 12 at some point in the studio here. Euro DJ wants to know, when am I going to be shooting out the JX10 versus the 8P? That will be part of my big JX3P versus 8P versus 10 video. That won't be a live stream. And the reason is because I want to get a little even more nerdy with it in terms of doing not oscilloscopes. I don't think oscilloscopes are particularly useful, but looking at the frequency analysis of them, especially when it comes to looking at filter compensation. And I really want to know if the 3-piece filter outclasses the 8P and the 10s. That would be kind of heartbreaking for me because I really love the 10s level of complexity in what you can do. I made a sound for the legendary synthesizer sample pack, which will be updated to SFZ soon so that you can use it in Serum 2. That update's coming out very soon. But I made a sound with the JX10 where it's got like a noise sweep on one layer and it's got this beautiful wide, just crazy thick super saw type pad underneath it. And it was gorgeous. And I was like, aside from the Matrix 12 behind me, only the JX10 could do a sound like this. So I really hope, if I'm being honest, my bias would be that the JX3P filter's not that much better than the JX10, so that I can keep it, because I really love the JX10. But if the filter on the JX3P is better, might be keeping it. We'll have to see. So Todd Phipps notes the 49-note keyboard on the OB6, but the effects are good. What do you guys think about the effects on all of the sequentials? I feel like they kind of get middling reviews. Adapt asks, any news on me getting the Prophet VS? I need help getting certification that it's USMCA compliant. That is to say that it was constructed in America, in the United States of America, and therefore making the argument it should be exempt from tariffs. But you need like some experts, you need a lot to get that to happen, and so I'm in the process of doing that, but we'll see. We shall see. I don't know if it's going to happen, and even if I do submit the paperwork with it or whatever, it could still be tariffed. So it's very hard to say. I would love to get it though, and especially if I could ever do a comparison with the Prophet 12. Daniel says, I don't understand 49 key strictly in terms of marketing. Seems like you lose a whole lot more customers than you gain from making 61 key. Yeah, Daniel, what I think that was a decision at a time to get out a product a little bit cheaper, and that moment, Korg, the Prologue is Korg's version of that, where they put out a keyboard without aftertouch, because everybody was really fighting in that sub $2,000 range, trying to put out synths that really attacked that part of the market. And I think they just were trying to keep the price down. And now I don't think anybody's that interested in it, but they're still putting out synths like Trigon 6, but it's because they already have the manufacturing set up, so they don't have to spend additional money making a new version or whatever. So it's a way to sort of evergreen a form factor But I do agree that it's better to, I mean, I'm a 61 key guy. I hate it when I love never touching an octave switch. For me, that's like one knob per function where it keeps me in the flow state. I always know my low notes down there and my high notes up there, and I know, you know. But, you know, at the end of the day, it's probably not that big of a deal. Most of the time when you're playing pads, they're all in 2 octaves, and the bass is all in 2 octaves, and the leads are all in 2 octaves. It's just more the ability to fuck around and find out and always have the range, you know. That's why I like it. But as far as actually using it, once you have something planned out, you know, it's kind of like 5 notes of polyphony versus 6. 5 notes is fine if you know what you're going to play, but 6 is useful if you're just fucking around and improvising, you know. AK says effects on OB6 are way better than on my Rev 2. That's interesting because I know Daniel's in the market maybe for a Rev 2. Keith says the effects in sequential are great. The spring reverb, Easter egg. I mean, come on. 40 Thieves. Why not call sequential to see if you can get a letter? That's a great fucking idea, 40. I'll have to see if they'll do that. Let's see. John from Edgetone, how are you doing? We're just wrapping up tonight, kind of finishing out this with a discussion of modern synths versus vintage synths in terms of, let me rephrase that, not in terms of like Devin's video, but in, you know, what are some alternatives to something like a Matrix 6, Oberheim OB6, Oberheim TO5, and then even bringing in some of the profits here. Todd says, my Matrix 6 was OEM'd in Japan by Sakata Shokai. Interesting, Sakata Shokai was the firm that manufactured the Hammond X5 for Neon Hammond in the late 70s. That's awesome. What does OEM mean again? I should know that, but I don't. Pliskin rightly notes the core digital synths only have 3 octave keyboards. Todd Phipps does not like 3 octave keyboards. Euro DJs, what do you think? Akai X73 is somewhat similar in nature to Matrix 6? Somewhat similar in that they use Curtis chips, but you're only going to get 1 oscillator per voice. So, no, it's good for filter FM, but I would rather have an Akai AX60 just so you have the knob per function, you know. AX73 is only really if you could get a great deal on it. In my opinion. Could be wrong, though. Yes, and Sari's correct. They're all based on Raspberry Pis. Oh, original equipment manufacturer. I see. Yeah. I don't know. Were all of the Matrix 6 done in Japan? I know there's a big difference between Matrix 12s made in America and Japan. So, yeah. Synsonic asks, have you a 61-key controller MIDI to your setup so you can focus on the synths with the best sound? I am currently reworking the wiring of everything. My goal is to get every single synth in the room MIDI'd up. I've had it where they're all wired up so you can turn them all on and play them at once, but I do want to get to where I could play them all from one master keyboard when I want to. And yes, I do have a really reasonably priced Alesis VI61. Yeah, VI61. They're about the same price, $200 or $300, and they have velocity and aftertouch. Not the best aftertouch, but at least it has it. Unlike the Novation MIDI controller, they were kind enough to send me to review, but my review was, damn, wish it had aftertouch because I've got a controller that's just as cheap, but you know. So, anyways, guys. I think that's a great place to call it for the evening. Thank you for hanging out with me for this exceptionally deep, depraved synth snob stream. I had a lot of fun. Hopefully the S's, the sibilance of my voice wasn't too much there. You guys are amazing. I couldn't ask for a better community. And I hope you guys have a phenomenal week. I'm looking forward to putting out some really cool videos soon. Got a new synthesizer in the studio no one's seen yet. Very excited. It's a modern synth. So expect some new videos soon. And it's going to be a lot of fun. Thank you, Hypothesis. It's always good to see you. And continue to be excellent, guys.